So, welcome everyone to Two Q's with Lisa Ward. I am your host. And today our guest is Miss Anne. So, Anne, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, hello. Well, thank you for having me, Lisa. I love it. Two Q's. Can't wait to answer them. So I am a personal storytelling coach. I teach people how to discover, understand, and communicate who they are and author who they're becoming through personal storytelling.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're doing today. But it's you telling your story.
Yes.
Um, so everyone gets the same two questions, and your first one is, what do you want that you don't already have?
Okay. All right. So I guess perhaps I should have said this in my introduction, right? So I'm a believer. So I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. So I'm a Christian. And so my answer to that question is that I'm not yet fully walking in what I know my calling and my purpose for my life is, and the vision that God has placed on my heart. So that means running a kingdom city and igniting a personal storytelling movement that's actually going to transform heart, change lives, and remake cities.
Wow. Okay, that's a big ask. That's a big goal. That's huge.
It
Okay.
is, yes, which is I can't. I totally can't do it on my own, right? Yeah.
But I think that's funny. Women typically, we have these like massive ideas, massive dreams, but then we realize, oh, but I'm just one person. How do I actually achieve this goal? So our second question is, what's holding you back from achieving that? So do you have a plan in place
So
or
here's the crazy thing. So this is wild, right? So the answer to the second question is nothing is holding me back. So,
oh,
yeah, I mean, I'm working it, right? Like I'm everything that God has placed on my heart and told me to do, I've obeyed and I've done. And so it's understanding. So when you walk by faith and not by sight, right? It's understanding what's my role and responsibility and what I have to do and what's God's role and responsibility, right? What he promises, what he's going to deliver. And in the last 2 years, I've been completely like transformed and remade, right? God transformed my heart and I'm a new person. And the process that God has put me through, um, it's healed me and it's made me whole because I had a lot of pain from so I spent over 20 years in the Marine Corps, 16 on active duty, 5 as a reservist. I went through a lot through that experience. I joined the Marine Corps in 1995 at 17 years old, turned 18 in boot camp. So as a female in the Marine Corps, I went through a lot. So I had a lot of hurt, I had a lot of pain. And then as an entrepreneur, the what I did when I left active duty after 10 years was start my own business. And I was betrayed and I failed. And then, the world says, "Hey, pick yourself back up, learn your lessons, try again." So I did that. And I once again failed and a lot of different things happened and I lost everything, foreclosed on my townhouse. I was basically homeless. It took a friend who loaned me some money so I could rent a room in somebody else's home,
wow.
and another friend telling me like, "And you're still in the Marine Corps Reserves." And I argue with him. He turned out to be right. So I was able to go back on mobilization orders back into the Marine Corps and, like get myself out of the financial hardship that I was finding myself in. But all of that, so much failure and just giving it all I had. So I'm the type of person, and I had overcome a lot in the Marine Corps and I had succeeded. And so when I left the Marine Corps, I thought, like, bring on the world, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing I
Nothing's
can't
holding
do.
me down. Yep.
Yeah. And I tell you what, being an entrepreneur and pursuing my dreams, it like gave me a severe beating, and that left me like I was, very wounded, very hurt. And so I thought I had processed everything. And when God told me what he had planned for me, it was he told me, like, "You have to know how to submit and surrender to me. You have to know how to obey," and kinda like the carrot of, like, how badly I've always wanted to make it as an entrepreneur. And they're like, "The only way you get there is, you have to come to me."
Mhm.
And at first, my eye was on the carrot, and then my eyes turned to God, and then I knew, like, "Oh, this is all for him." But he's gonna work he worked in me, then he's gonna work through me because he does have a plan for the world, right? And he uses believers and his children to make that happen. But in that process, he was just peeling layers, like just bring stuff up that I was like, what? Like I didn't even know that was a thing, and it was things with shame, things that happened in my life that had created shame and doubt. And I realized, oh, I was a pity party like master. Like
Mm.
I knew how to throw myself a pity party. And he was just, strip that. I was like, we're not gonna do that anymore. And just everything and just the pain from having failed and the financial hardship and just it just like renewed me to where now I can walk out this big vision that he's giving me and I'm equipped for it. And whatever I don't have, I know he's got it or he'll send it through somebody else. So it's like that level of faith and trust in him is the only way this is possible for me to even do it. Yeah, I know that's a lot.
It is, but I mean, even within like even just a career, like you thought we picked a career, we picked a lane. I'm gonna be good at this. It wasn't exactly what we thought it was gonna be, so we pivot to something else, and we're all in on that. And then that doesn't work. But then you continued to pick yourself up. That's admirable for sure. Oh, and we of course we all throw big pity parties for ourselves because that's
Yeah.
easy to do. Be adult toddlers and throw a tantrum and it's your fault, it's not my fault. All of those things, but it's very courageous to pick yourself up from your bootstraps and literally move forward. I love
I
all of that.
I do feel like I've lived multiple lifetimes
Yeah,
already. Like,
yeah.
it really truly feels and I tell my friends, like, I'm in the 3rd half. Like, I'm in the 3rd half of my life, right? And it really is and I've accomplished a lot, so I don't minimize my accomplishment, but I don't stand and it's also, like, they're part of who I am, but because I do who over what, right? So if you look at what I've done, it does paint a picture, an aspect of who I am, but there's so much greater in me, and I've always known that. And I used to be this huge source of pain was knowing what my potential was, but my reality didn't reflect it.
Mm,
And I
mhm.
mean, and that's when you look at other people and you go into judgment and you're like, well, this person's not smarter than me. This person, like, why do they have these things
Yeah,
and everything that
comparison is
I'm
awful to
doing,
do.
right,
Yeah.
doesn't succeed? And I went through a season where when I was working on one of my tech startup, everybody else that I was helping doing exactly what I was doing, they were succeeding and I still wasn't. And it was just like just this it just felt like everything was I think this is where the pity party it felt like it really did feel like everything was conspiring against me. And what God made me realize was that one, I was chasing after the what of lives, right? So, what being a successful entrepreneur was going to afford me and provide me. And what matters to Him is who we are. So once I realized like it's about who I am, it's about my heart posture, it's about how I present, how I'm able to make connection and be present for people. And like, I want to have this, and it's one of those things like, I want to have this massive impact on the grand scale, but I won't step into one on one the hardship that you're going through. Like, you know, God's not gonna allow that.
Yeah.
It's like serve people today, right?
Yeah. Meet
At the
them where they
lowest
are.
level combinator. And then that's what grows and that's what he rewards, right? And that's what shows who you are and that you can be entrusted with more. And um I really had to realize like, okay, my motives were wrong. And quite honestly, that's how I became a personal storyteller, is that I found myself in a situation where this was a little over 10 years ago. I was in Prague I was mobilized working with the Marine Corps in Germany. So over a long weekend, I went to Prague and I saw this man in the park and his pants were wet. And I really want to reach out and help him, which was new to me, right? So, I mean, as a Marine, obviously, I've served, right? So I had a heart of service, but
Mhm.
it was different. It was in a different modality, so to speak. So the one on one of like, okay, I'm going to help this person, I didn't know how to do it. And I was just frozen. I was like, I don't know how to do this. And it wasn't even the language barrier. It was like, I don't like, I don't know how to go up to a stranger and help them. Like,
Mhm.
and we should be able to do that, right?
Mhm.
And I couldn't. And then God gave me the next revelation. And not only did I not know how to do it, he made me realize I had never up to that point cared to connect with human beings and to be that kind of person. And
Mhm.
it just broke my heart, and I just started crying right there, and I walked back to my hotel and just crying and asking God to teach me, like, teach me how to change, how to be the type of person that someone is in need, and I don't hesitate.
Yeah.
Like, no matter the circumstance, the situation, I see need, I help. And part of that process, I continued to travel, and I started staying in Airbnbs. And so I'm staying with strangers. They're opening up their homes. And of course, they're going to ask, like, hey, what brings you here? They want to know more about you. And I thought, this is it. Like, this is an opportunity for me to make connections with people that are being kind to me and sharing their homes with me. So because I was traveling and having all these adventures, I started sharing stories and they were entertained and engaged by them and they wanted to know more about me, and I was like, oh. So I really started structuring my stories and I realized like I could really be vulnerable through
Mhm.
sharing the stories, and I could add a lot of richness to who I am and describing myself through the story. And I didn't feel vulnerable doing it that way. So I really began embracing personal storytelling that way. And yeah, and then during COVID, when everything shut down and people were really struggling, because and really realizing that we replace physical connection with actual like real connection, right? So if you make heart to heart connection with someone, you don't
Mhm.
need to be physically with them, right? Because you're really connecting. And that's when I started hosting the first time storytelling broadcast and bring people on so they could learn how to open up that way through storytelling. And then I discovered people are not very good at it. So
What? Being actual people and communicating? Nah.
yeah. So I put a little course together and, self-published a book on it. This was in September of 2020, and I have since then significantly further researched it and expanded the concept. And like I said, like God has been all part of that, but a huge part of redoing everything was also he was still teaching me how to further open up and trust. And when I was putting my course together, there's there's one, the class literally on open up and being vulnerable. I was just like, this this is so ironic that I'm the one teaching this, right? Because it's not at all up until 10 years ago. And it's not at all who I was.
Mhm.
And I had always started business that were based on my strength, you know, and leading from that, and God really brought me to a place where, no, you're going to learn how to do this, and you're going to build a business that's actually based on what's been a weakness and something that you weren't able to do, and that you had to learn. So now that you can teach it, to other
Yeah, you're the
people.
product of your business.
Yeah, exactly. And you can say, hey, this really does work, but it is a lot of work, you know.
Mhm. Okay, so you've got the book, you've got the class. We do still have the broadcast, or is it now just in podcast form?
No, so that there's a little bit still on my YouTube, my whole YouTube channel that has to be revamped. But I do plan on starting down the road another podcast. So it's gonna be called The Comeback of Humanity to Personal Storytelling, Battle, Division, Loneliness, and Stagnation. So which is all part of educating people what personal storytelling really is, because people
Mhm.
think recounting and retelling what you've done is storytelling, but it isn't. So to get to experience the power of personal storytelling and the fact that it can battle loneliness, division, and stagnation, you gotta understand what it is. So right now it's I'm on a big education push, right? It's
Okay.
just like, who else teaches personal storytelling? And, and I tell people it's a communication tool. It's a personal, it's also a personal development tool. My course is embedded in psychological concept. So it's the elements of storytelling. And then it's a lot of psychological concept, because it's about you discovering and understanding who you are, so that
Mhm.
you can communicate in a way that is meaningful to your audience and has an impact, right? And that you have processed what has happened to you, the impact, how it has shaped you, how you've been influenced, that you understand the way that you think, the way that you make decision, so that you can communicate it, because it's key that you communicate your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. And we're not used to that. Like,
No,
very
we're
rarely are you gonna hear people communicate thoughts, feelings, and emotions, but that's what makes up who we are.
Mhm. Yeah, learn
Not
how to
just
get
what
it out of
happened to you.
people
Yeah.
and like be comfortable enough to be vulnerable. Um, I think with social media, we're so canned, and it's the filter. It's only a certain aspect of life that we actually share or we're comfortable sharing. But then you also see some people that are like, okay, you're sharing a little too much and not in a healthy format. But it's like a dumpster fire. So of course we all cling to it and are drawn to it. And that's, you could spiral with a bad way of sharing or a non-healthy way of sharing your stories. I just, well, like all of the different memes of like dating, or I think of like the caricatures of the different generations within the corporate world, um bad ways of
Yeah,
communicating things.
and so much, so much. And I'll pick those back up. I used to do first time storytelling networking events, and it was really fun, because everyone has to tell a story based on the same prompt. So so let's say the prompt is your first car. And what's incredible is that you realize that we all have common human experiences. They differ based on where you're from, what generation, socioeconomics. And so there are differences. But then there's the common, feeling of getting your first car. Like, there's only so many different feelings that came with it, right? And for most people, it was that feeling of freedom, right? Some had a feeling of dread because they were being forced to dread. So there's
Yeah.
4 or 5 different ones that people, feel about the experience, but everything surrounding might be different, and how they process what was happening is different. But you start realizing, wait, what? So you got your first car 50 years ago, and I got, my first car 10 years ago, but yet that experience was that
What's similar?
similar,
Hmm.
right? So it's not about what the make and model of the car was, but it was everything that made it happen, that was surrounding it. And most people, and when you ask them to tell you the story of their first car, they're going to hone in on the make and model of the car, not on, maybe like how long they had to save to get the car, or, again, what it meant for them to get this car, like how it impacted and changed their lives, and like that's the story, that's the and I, for me, like my story like revealed, it wasn't even about the car, but it revealed, you know, like how much, like it made me realize that my stepmom loved me and she was thinking about me. So like it was totally not about the car, right? So it's just like this amazing thing that happens, and people hear those stories, and that's what they start realizing, like, oh, we totally have more in common than what separates us, right? And it's
Hmm.
okay that their experience was different. It's actually kind of cool hearing how their experiences was different. And you know, that's what it means to be human and connected on the human level. But it's not, again, it's not the conversation that we're having.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a way better icebreaker or team building question than like, what's your Starbucks order? Or the two truths and a lie, and then you have to figure out what the lie is. But if you're awful at lying, like it's obvious because of like your eyebrows change or your tone changes. Like, okay, that's silly. We know you. But I love the storytelling. I think that could be a part of team building, especially if you're a part of like a unique project or something. You're all pulled in from different departments. You don't necessarily know one another. That could
mhm.
be like instant bonding, but from a different perspective.
Yep. I actually have a corporate program, and it's enhanced company culture
There you go.
through personal storytelling.
Good.
Because, that's what you ultimately want, right? You want everyone in the organization to get to know each other and to connect at a much deeper level, to
Hmm.
understand one another, and to, it solves so many, like, if you don't want to have issues and problem, like personnel issues in your organization, you need to connect your people, and you need to teach them how to communicate, how to process their feelings and emotions, right? How to regulate, the whole, right, self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And becoming a personal storyteller teaches you how to do that.
Hmm.
So
How do
it's
you feel about like the personality tests or the like you're a driver, you're a people pleaser, there's so many different like Myers-Briggs, all of those things.
I'm completely 100% against personality tests.
I had a feeling that's what you were going to say because that's still the mindset of I can only be
It's
this.
labels.
Yeah.
I don't label, like, and that's the biggest thing I have to teach. Like, I teach that in the course, right? It's like, don't like, step away from labels,
Hmm.
because it's going to be a complete assumption. You're going to throw a label out, and you're going to assume that for the person, it means the same thing.
Yeah. And it
Odds
won't.
are it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And then
funny
you're going to walk
because
away thinking like, oh, they totally get
I'm
me.
this.
Like, yeah. But that person, so I have a saying, I don't want people to walk away with an assumption of who I am. I want them to have an understanding. If I want someone to have an understanding of who I am, that responsibility is on law to
Mhm.
to communicate that to you, right? I can't guarantee. that you're going to receive it, 100%,
Mhm.
right? But I'm increasing my odds that you'll have a greater understanding if I'm properly communicating, and especially again through storytelling, I'm immersing you in my experience, right? So my plan, what I need to do through personal storytelling is shut down the part of your brain that's thinking about what I'm saying, and instead you're in it with me. So that way, what I
That's
felt.
gotta be hard.
No, we're
No?
wired. Yeah, no, neurocoupling, we're wired for that.
Okay.
So you just it but you have to set it up, right? So when you share, you need to provide a little bit of backstory to orient the person, right? And then you have to introduce yourself as the main character of the story. That is key. And that's what people don't do when they retell and when they just recount and retell what happened. They're not introducing themselves as the character. So you're listening to it, but you're seeing yourself through it. But if I
Mhm.
introduce myself as the character and I'm letting you know, again, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, how old I was, what was happening, now that's that's who you're thinking about. And then
Mhm.
I'm continuing to walk you through it, and I'm keeping you in the story. And that's people don't have the art of doing that. They don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Oh, that could probably change how we write movie scripts too, or just like screenplays or
Well, that's what they're doing in movie scripts and screenplays, right? Because they're introducing you to a character,
Mhm.
and they're right. And that's why we go to movies or to plays or we read books, right? We're not seeing ourselves in the book. We're seeing the characters that
Mhm.
we relate to them. Like clearly the characters become this other person that we come to know and we relate to, right? That's what you're doing as a personal storyteller. I want you to come to get to know me and remove your perspective, understand my perspective, and then relate to my perspective.
Hmm. I like it. I like it. I like it. Um, just the storytelling process. Are you a fan of Brene Brown? Or if you are you familiar with any
I
of her
am
work?
familiar with her. So I actually, when I was rewriting my book, read quite a few of her books. So she's definitely like, the vulnerability lady, right?
Mhm.
So I definitely read quite a bit of her books. And again, because in personal storytelling, it's a lot about expressing emotions, your
Mhm.
feelings and emotion. And right there, you have to distinguish. There is a difference between an emotion and a feeling. So, having that understanding, and then what the feelings really, what they really are. She has a great book on that. So I definitely did do a lot of reading.
Yeah, I
Um,
see her more as like the relationship, like how I'm perceiving information and the story I'm telling myself is. She uses that over and over in one of her books. Um, so that's one of the things I thought of as we're telling our story, you're immersing yourself in my world, how this, so
well,
I
that's
could
the
see that
cool.
overlapping, but it's different. It's a different perspective and a different purpose.
Well, but there's similarities. So that's the cool thing
Yeah.
about, so with my clients, right? So once they've told me a handful of stories, one, I'll start picking up the themes in their stories, right? And then I'll start picking up if they have assigned themselves a narrative identity. So
Hmm.
a narrative identity is really kind of like what Renee talks about, right? Where you see yourself as the victim of your story, where like how do you see yourself in your story? Well, when you're sharing your stories, especially, it really doesn't take that long. If there's a narrative identity running through your stories, I'm going to pick it up right away. Um, and so should you, right? So, and that's the beauty of doing this process is that will come to light. And that's when you're able to start changing it. And that's why I say I teach you how to discover, understand, and communicate who you are and author who you're becoming, because once you know who you are and how you think and how you got to where you are, you do come to realize it's my choices and decisions. And it's how I chose to react, right? And a lot of it is I emotionally react this way and I continue to have this behavior because of it. And your story are just going to highlight that.
Mm-hmm.
And then becoming a storyteller teaches you mindfulness and that you become present and you realize, okay, I'm the main character of my stories. I am, life is happening, right? So the plot comes from life, right? The plot of my life is running. How am I showing up as the character, in my story? And then if I'm not the character that I want to be in my story, how do I change that?
Mm-hmm.
And I teach, how to start establishing instead of just self-talk, you want to have an author. You want to develop an actual author that is holding the space of who you want to be. And that is stepping in and be like, hey, it's kind of like, hey, main character, this behavior does not get us a different outcome.
Yeah.
Like, and you engage with that and it really empowers people because you do realize, okay, I'm the main character and I can be the author.
Mm-hmm.
Now for me, I talk about in the book, I'm a little a author and the big author is God. And sometimes, my prayer time, I call it an author's meeting and I'm like, hey,
Writers meeting. Okay, we're
yeah.
gonna
So,
attack the script.
I'm not a big fan on how the story is playing out. Like if I was writing it, I would give myself a little bit of a breakthrough here, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's not happening. So what are you trying to accomplish? Can you fill me in? I need to know. So, yeah. So I do kind of have, and I will literally put in my journal authors meeting and write that out.
That's so funny. Well, that kind of the journaling prospect or process. Do you have a like goals setting? So if we are trying to pivot the plot and like do some self-talk, some self-analysis, is there anything in your program that talks about goals and how we help
So
continue
I
on
still
that
have
path?
to I still have to further develop. So I do want to release an entire I at some point I will release an entire different book, an entire different course, which will be on the author development.
Okay.
So I started introducing the author and the big thing in it, because again, goals are what level, right? So I'm not a goal person. I'm a who person, right? So it is identifying like who do you want to be? And in the who, you're gonna see that it's, virtue, value, character, personality trait, mindsets. It's different things that you have to shift. So it's not what things, it's right? It's who level things. So then it's studying, right? Researching um what that whatever, if you want a different, so for example, one of the things I wanted to change about who I wanted to be more generous, right? So, well, I sought out examples of people that are generous. I sought out, what the Bible says about generosity, right? And then it's not like I made a goal, like I'm going to be more generous. It was just like, okay, I, in the moment, being mindful, is there an opportunity here for me to be generous? And when the opportunity presents itself, what comes up, right? What mindset, like you know, what do I believe about being generous and how do I reprogram that so that that's no longer what I think, therefore I will be, more I'll naturally be generous. And
Hmm.
so it was reading books and listening to sermons and really capturing that to do the
Okay.
shift and then pushing myself to be generous and checking my heart posture, right? Because I didn't want out of obligation to be generous, because it's not the act of being generous I'm after. It's being a generous person I'm after. And that's understanding, because that's a significant difference.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can look generous, and not in your heart be generous. So it's like in my heart, I want to be generous.
Well, darn,
Yeah.
I just wanted to write it off, mark it off the list. That's a lot easier. But that's, I mean, that's where we would all go to, because it's like, okay, well, I tithed or I donated to my favorite nonprofit. But it's
Yeah. And you're
the
like, yeah.
purpose
And
behind it
yeah.
that
And
you're
that's
focused
what
on.
level action that doesn't actually, right? It's,
Mm-hmm.
and it's who it's a, because you want to be truly transformed, right? You want to be who you imagine yourself that you can be. And it's for certain people, that's even a hard concept to grasp, right? That there's like so you have to establish who you are so that you
Mm-hmm.
can see like the possibilities of I can be so, I
The
can
growth
be
in different
so much
areas.
more,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can show up completely differently. And ideally it is because you and then you start so part of becoming a storyteller is also understanding all the supporting characters in your life, right? And so once you start understanding the supporting characters and the influence that they have on you, because, again, through your stories, you get to understand how they've influenced you. It becomes a lot easier to make decisions that, you know what, they're not a good influence on me. Every time I'm with this person, this is how they make me feel. And through sharing the story or, you processing your experiences and the events, like that's coming to light. Like it's just, it's amazing how much clarity it provides you. So now it's just like, well, again, who do I want to surround myself with? Like, who are the supporting characters that I want in my stories?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to have a better influence and impact, right? Um, yeah,
And make you a better person and uplift you like you would want to uplift
exactly.
them.
Um,
So if I'm in a new space, in a new role, and I want to like get to know my new team, but I'm nervous about telling my story. It's like the car scenario. How would you instigate that type of dialogue?
Excellent question, Lisa. So, the easiest place to share a story is from the stage, right? Like, I love what the moth does. But the easiest place to share a story is from the stage. Like once you get over your fear of public speaking, the hardest place to share stories to weave it into conversation.
Yeah.
So to be able to get to the level where you can weave a story into a conversation, you need to know your story, like your stories inside and out, right? So you need to know what it's communicating. You need to know like where it's appropriate. So the process of becoming a personal storyteller is you learn the skills, you start outlining your stories, building your repertoire, you rehearse your story, in the mirror, recording it, right? And at the school, sorry, the world of personal storytelling, my goal there is that you don't just come for the training, you come for the community. Now you come in the community of personal storyteller and you practice your story. Part
Mm-hmm.
of practicing your story is the other person is going to give you feedback on your story, right? So now you're going to practice, you're going to get feedback, you're going to, you know, refine the story and you're going to have a solid hook. So it's all, to weave it in conversation, you really want a powerful hook. And a hook lets the person know, you know, it's to pique the interest, right? The most
Mm-hmm.
famous hook, of all time, once upon a time, right? And you don't say once upon a time, like you say once upon a time, right? A story is coming,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you need to know how to deliver your hook to your audience. And your audience in personal storytelling is like one or two people, right? You need to know how to drop the hook that ties into the conversation. And then the person is going to be like, hmm, okay, I'm curious, right?
Tell me more. Yeah.
And you get their attention. And then you start with the backstory, right? You orient them, you draw them in, and then you immerse them in the story. And you're able to do that because you've rehearsed, you've practiced, you know your story, um, and then like you deliver your story.
Mhm.
And what will end up happening usually, either the person is going to ask you more question, right? So it depends what kind of listeners that they are, right? And what, but so they're either going to ask you, questions about the story that you share, or they're going to go right into sharing their own stories, right? Like you're going to create that space where now we're communicating at that level. But also ideally, and this is why for organization, like to do I want to bring the program so that they create like, personal story circle times and opportunities where
Mhm.
we're meeting and we know this is what we're doing. We're sharing stories, right? And we're going to enter that space. And I'm going to be an active listener to your story because every personal storyteller should be a very good active listener, because
Huh.
you being able to really like read body language, decipher what they're saying, capturing, being able to shut your own brain to fully commit your attention to somebody else, like learning that enhances who you are as a personal storyteller because it enhances what you learn and what you start appreciating. And like one of my friend, I mean, he's a much better storyteller than I am. Like I will like, but he's a natural. Like it's a gift. He's a
Mhm.
natural storyteller. So, but when I'm listening, it's the words that he's using, the expression and how he delivers them. And it's just like, and I know I'm like, oh yeah, this, you didn't learn this. This is a gift. Like, you're
Yeah.
so gifted at this. But most of us are not. But it
Mhm.
is paying attention to others that you refine your style and you do get much better at it. Um, I can't do voices. Like, and that's one of my that's my next level that I want to go with my
Okay.
personal storytelling. Like I want to be, if I like if if I'm representing what a man say, I would like to be able to change. I can do,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yep.
doing the British accent. You know how like that just the weirdest thing. Like when you try and do a voice, you automatically become British. You're like, what do I do?
Oh, okay. Well, then you need to just come hang out with me because I have a theater background and twang comes out because I am from Texas, but I'll put it on if I need to get a point across. Or we'll break out into a British accent or some like cockamamie, not quite an Irish or Australian, or like, okay, where are you claiming you're from right now? Okay, cool. Good job, Lisa. Yeah. But active listening, so many people do not, they're so worried about what's going on in their world or the next thing on their to-do list. If we could like shut phones off, shut social media off, and like just be present with people,
People have no idea
we would accomplish so much more.
what a precious gift your presence, like your listening and your attention is to another human being. It literally is one of the most precious thing you can offer another
Hmm.
human being. It costs you absolutely nothing
Yeah. Like I
to
even
be.
think in a board meeting or just like a meeting, like team meeting in general, if you're the one presenting, you've worked really hard to, on this project, whatever it is, and literally nobody else is listening, like looking at you. They're halfway listening because they're doodling on their paper or they're scrolling through on their phone or they're checking email on their computer. Like if we literally put technology away for a hot second and focused on people, we would get so much more accomplished. It's nuts.
But it's not yes, we would get more accomplished, but we would also not have the mental health issues that we have.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it is scary and heartbreaking that, but I understand why they've been established, but I think it's wrong, right? You have all these chat bots or whatever, right? And it's just like AI doing mental health and like, and people are like, oh, I can't believe, how much, you know, it basically like it is listening to me, right? And it's like, this
But
is
it's
not the road.
not. It's literally
This
just
is
an
not the road we
algorithm.
want to go down, right?
Yeah.
This is not, and talking to AI is not training you to talk to another human being, and it certainly is
No.
not training you to be ready to listen and be present for another human being. So
Mhm.
we really need to be careful with this, right? And which is why, like, we need to engage
Mhm.
with communicating in a way that is powerful and that's engaging, it's entertaining. That's the thing with personal, like, it is, once you know how to create your story and deliver it, people will listen. Like, people are
Yeah.
like, well, people don't have attention spans anymore, da da da. And I'm like, ever think that it's because there's nothing worth listening to, right?
Mhm.
The brain is created to seek meaning. And so I do a show don't tell event through Alignable, right? So it's a business networking platform.
Mhm.
And they have to share a personal story that shows who you are. So instead of telling, I'm honest, I'm trustworthy, I'm creative. No, you have to share a story where, you displayed honesty, creativity, trustworthiness, right?
Mhm.
And one of the person last week was like, he's like, this crazy thing happened. Right? I was listening to Thomas's story, and his story made me feel good.
Ah, it
And I'm
worked.
like, welcome, welcome to the world of personal storytelling,
Uh-huh.
right? And Thomas like, what? He's like, me talking about myself made you feel good? So I'm like, I don't know what story he was sharing, but clearly it had good meaning, right? And he shared his feelings and emotion, and it was good feelings. And so you were aligned to having good feelings. And
Mhm.
I'm like, hello, like, and that's what makes us more attractive, more relatable, more likable. And if you want greater influence, be more likable, relatable,
Yeah, be nice.
right? Like, it's not about being the know-it-all or whatever. It's, hey, you know what? I really like this person. I can trust this person. I know this person. So I believe and trust, what they say. And then you yield very positive influence, right?
Yeah.
You're not manipulating what you're saying to influence. You've earned, the influence through generally being who you are and showing up for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Actions. Yep. Okay. So recap here. What all do you have available for people? Because we covered a lot.
Okay, so the biggest thing is the world of personal storytelling. It's the school. So in the school, you have access to the course, and I'm looking to build a community there. Uh, the rewrite of the book is not yet published. Uh,
Okay.
this is one of the meetings I'm having with God because I would like to self-publish. He had me write a book proposal. I'm like, we're at odds with what to do with the book. But and so I do teach live free events on Eventbrite. So if you find first time storytelling on Eventbrite, they're recorded in the school if you want the live version on Eventbrite. And I do group coaching. So I do group coaching for stories for dating, right?
Mhm.
Do group coaching for the show Don't Tell, and I do for interviews, right? So taking the basic interview question and having a quick story to share. And so I do group coaching for interviews, for dating, networking, yeah.
Oh, the whole world needs you. People don't know how to communicate or know what they're like, understanding what they're feeling to then verbalize that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I get to have some fun conversations with clients, and those are feelings or scenarios we never want to be in, but we have to talk about them, just in case. So we have lots of practice of getting things out of people, whether they want to share it or not. But that's also, how we discover some other fun things about people too.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's all, because that's the thing, it's all layered. Like, it's all like, people, your past is alive. Like, it
mhm.
is like, it is a flowing river. Like, people, if anybody tells you to forget your past and then just move on, and you haven't processed your past, you don't know how, like, there's no moving on
No.
until it's been processed. Because then you just wash, rinse, and repeat, and you
Yeah.
wonder why. It's
Yeah.
like,
I've been stuck in this cycle. Awesome.
and
Okay.
it's not about, therapy. Like, I love, I'm all about therapy. This is like, I'm in between. So I'm not, personal storytelling is not therapy, but is therapeutic.
Hmm.
And it is, to me, it is better than, again, obviously I'm impartial, right? I think it's better than life coaching and executive coaching, because it addresses the who, not the what. So that you don't start crawling, going up a ladder and then you realize, okay, right ladder, wrong wall. Right. So, yeah.
I've never heard that, but that is so true. Oh, yes. Oh, I have watched that happen. Goodness. Okay. We're gonna wrap this up here. So one little nugget you have, just piece of advice for somebody who's wanting to either start their business or trying to figure out how to tell their story, whether it's with branding or just being present in their company. That was too many different things. So like just starting to start their business and wanting to be authentic and tell their story. What piece of advice would you give them
So
besides take your class?
yeah, well, it would be, ground yourself in the who, right? Like, don't, I think with business, we envision a lot of what,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, what we want to achieve, what we want to do, um, accomplish. It's like, who do you want to be, right? Who do you want to be in and through the business? And how is who you are in the business, right? How are your values, your virtues, and because when we first start, we don't think about that. And then again, we wonder, like, we get off track because it's what,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, take the time to be who, so that you show up, like, when the level, like, excellence matters to me, right? So the level of the proposal that I'm going to submit have to be at the level excellence of who I am, right? So the what represents the who, but you want to lead from the who in the production of the what. Hopefully that makes sense to you, so it makes
Yes.
sense to others.
Yeah. Well, yes. And I'm a numbers driven person, so we're always going to focus on the numbers and the math behind it all. But there has to be a purpose and a story behind the numbers, because otherwise, who cares? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the purpose behind it. So fantastic. I'm so excited. You're going to have that next book. We don't know when it's going to come out, but it will. I love it. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and hope you join us for our next episode, and that you all have a great day.
Bye.